everybody. Welcome to the garage. A lot of people have said to me, how do I get hold of the podcast? Well, look, if you've got one of those devices, a Google Nest or a device, you just simply say, hey, Google, play me Jeremy Cordo's podcast, The Latest Court of Public Opinion, and it'll go tweet, tweet, and it'll pop up there. Now, don't ask me how that happens. I have no idea. I just think it's a miracle. Quite amazing. But, of course, apart from that, we're here on Facebook, but moving soon to our own radio station from my dining room table. I know it's hard to explain, but it's all in the making. We'll have a couple of shakedowns. Oh, something else too. Someone suggested to me that we have a look at the dates after I've had my rant and rave about whatever I rant and rave about, towards the end of the broadcast. So I'll try that if that's what you want. Is anything about this program, anything you like or you don't like, just tell me. I was listening to this new package on higher education, tertiary education. I was listening to that yesterday, and I want to read the whole thing, so I'll probably do that on the weekend. I want to talk to you at length about it. You know what I say? I'm fond of saying the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Here is this business where they look like the intention is to make tertiary education more available. And that's a great thing. More available to people who would not normally think of going to university. And that's a great thing. But when they get into saying, well, you know how we used to have 50% was the pass mark? Well, you know, that's a bit high. So what we'll do, I think what we'll do is to have a lower pass mark. In other words, what they're saying is they will lower the bar. Is that something we should be doing with tertiary education? All well and good, great to get more people into universities. But keeping them there, passing them on to the next year, when clearly they have no aptitude for academic learning or academic life, what is that going to do to the standards? Anyway, I won't go on with it now. I want to have a good look at exactly what they are proposing, which is plenty. In fact, it's probably the biggest shake-up of higher education that I've seen in my life. I still wonder what they're going to do about that HEX thing. That was brought in by, let me think, that was brought in by Paul Keating. And it's based on the American model, I think. And I think it's fair enough. Not easy, of course. But if you get an education for nothing, you owe the system, pay it back. In other words, you are really paying it forward, aren't you? So other people can benefit. As soon as you're making, I think it's $45,000 from the degree that you got for nothing, you have to start paying that back to the system. I can't see why you can't go on with that, but let me read the whole thing. I love it that Philip Lowe, soon to be the former governor of the Reserve Bank, is remembered as historically delivering the lowest interest rates in our history. The lowest interest rates in the history of Australia. Now that is an angle on Philip Lowe that you will not hear from the Labor Party or the popular media, but it is true. And I think he can be justifiably proud of that. This was sent to me. It's kind of funny. I think I can do it. A man followed a girl into a bathroom, stating that he identified as a woman. The man's teeth were knocked out by the girl's father, who identifies as the tooth fairy. Pete, do you like that? The world is going mad, you know. Mad, 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 mad. Peter Clayton's behind the camera. Did you get any feedback about that song?
I hadn't noticed, no.
That's a great piece of music. But when we've got our radio station up and running, which is only sort of a matter of days, weeks away, we'll be able to play lots of things like that for you. Death Valley is the hottest place in the world. You probably knew that. This is all about global warming, climate change. The greatest con since Y2K, you know, the millennium bug, the world was going to end and blah, blah. The hottest day in Death Valley was in 1913. I wouldn't say that man's intervention or involvement in the climate had been all that great back in 1913. Had a few cars on the road, wasn't much else. You'll not hear the popular media tell you that. It's been hot lately in Death Valley, but it's actually always hot in Death Valley. As I say, the hottest day ever was in 1913. You can look it up. It won't be reported because, of course, that's not the narrative. Very hot weather around the northern hemisphere, I know. People fainting. In fact, it's just terribly, terribly, terribly hot. Unseasonably hot. And that's called the climate. It's the climate. Look up climate change. And it is perfectly natural, it'll tell you. We're coming out of an ice age, you know. The planet is warming. But that's the cycle. Man's contribution to the problem is something, I guess, yes. And it would be better if it was less. But please, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Cancel civilization. Destroy your economy to achieve absolutely nothing. Listen, I got this from my friend Sue. Pete, have you got that receipt?
Yes, I have.
Well, I'll just tell everyone the background. Her well-travelled friend passed it on to her. I'll just read you a little bit of this, and then I'll show you a copy of the receipt that I'm talking about. I'll post the attached copy of the restaurant receipt. This lady was holidaying in Canada. Now, added to the bill, you will see that there is a 1% surcharge. 1% on the bill. This is part of a Canadian government initiative, it says. And it also goes on to say 0.8% of Canadian GDP, that's the wealth of Canada, is directed to indigenous Indians for land rent. It is presently voluntary. Yeah? Expectations are that it will become countrywide and, of course, compulsory in due course. It's estimated average homeowners under the scheme to decolonise, they put it so quaintly, decolonise the backyards of Canadians. Decolonise your backyard. The average Canadian will pay about $400 annually to the First Nations communities on whose territory, they tell you, you are living. And the link goes on to explain more. Need I say anything else? This is the voice in action, Canada style. You want that here? An example of what you have to know. You have to know personally. If you vote for this nonsense, if you vote and this referendum gets up, this country will never be the same again, because you can't remove this stuff from the Constitution. Think about it. We've got plenty of time to do our independent, personal research on this. But as I'm fond of saying, if in doubt, don't. A new drug has been trialled and proven to slow down the progression of Alzheimer's. It's a drug that is said to slow the disease by about 35% if it is administered in the early stages. There are other drugs that are being prescribed and used to degrees of success, but this one clearly shows the most promise. It's been described as a real breakthrough. Let's hope it is. Let's hope it is. Daniel Andrews, Chairman Dan, Victorian Premier, who, as I remember, was very keen to stage the 2026 Commonwealth Games, and the announcement was made a few weeks before the last election. He was very keen to get the regions on side. Anyway, they've announced that they will not go ahead as planned. The reason is the cost, which was budgeted at $2.5 billion. Now, more likely to be about $7 billion, as the Games were going to be staged in and around regional Victoria. There were obviously huge amounts of money that would have to be spent on infrastructure and things like that. But hell, you've got to win an election. Anyway, I applaud the decision to cancel the Games. I'm only terribly sorry for the people who will lose their jobs. I'm sorry for the athletes who are counting on and looking forward to the competition. But it only makes sense. The state is hopelessly in debt. It's about the sort of thing that we were here in South Australia after a period of bad government. Who would spend $7 billion on a 12-day sporting event? The question, however, I would like to ask is, when the Victorians made their pitch to acquire the Games, someone in the public service must have done his sums, worked out just exactly what it was going to cost the public purse so they could shape their pitch, make their offer, meaning they would have known whether they could have afforded to do it or not. How could you possibly get that sort of thing wrong? You reckon it's going to cost $2.5 billion? And then a year or a bit later you realise, no, it's going to cost $7 billion. Seriously? You people are in charge of the finances of Victoria? What else have you got wrong, I wonder? I mean, this should be fodder for the opposition. I don't know if they're making a lot of it or not. I would suggest they've got plenty wrong, and if you went digging a bit, you'd find a lot of interesting stuff. And I wonder, another side issue, I suppose, is what it's going to cost the Victorian community to get out of that commitment. I heard today something like $1 billion to cancel the contract. Others say $3 billion to cancel the contract. It's amazing, isn't it? $2.5 billion to put the Games on and $3 billion to not put the Games on. I'm not really a great sporting person, as you might know if you follow the things that I do and say, but I've got respect for people who enjoy sport, socially, professionally. But I would imagine that there would be very few nations or states in the world who could afford to spend billions of dollars on things like the Commonwealth Games. If you want sport or anything, you've got to cut your coat to suit your cloth. In other words, live within your means. And by the way, looking at the state debt of Victoria, which I did get a chance to look up a bit this afternoon, the Andrews Labor government has added $45 billion a day, $45 billion a day to the state's debt since it was first elected. And he still keeps on getting elected. The Australian Electoral Commission has published information about the upcoming referendum for the voice. I don't know when we'll get it. I suppose some of us will go to the website and look at it in that fashion. Others will get and look forward to getting and reading a hard copy, the official yes and no campaign. God knows how the yes people could find 15 pages, things to fill 15 pages to justify this thing. There are 7 pages opposing the idea and stating why. When the campaign actually gets started in earnest, I guess that'll be when the date is called. There'll be so much stuff out there. Some of it right, some of it wrong. Good, bad, nice, nasty, truth, lies. Anyway, it's going to be an interesting and feisty campaign. I personally will be grateful when the whole thing is over. I believe there will be a resounding no vote. I believe that. But the government, I also believe, will then legislate to put this wretched thing into our lives one way or another. Just remember, as I say, and I keep saying, if in doubt, don't. Or as the No campaign says, if you don't know, vote no. Which is pretty obvious, really. None of us has a crystal ball. If we did, when these people came out and wanted land rights and we had Mabo and Wick, you remember all of that? We had no idea back then that this move would see Aboriginal people, Australians, who should have no more rights than any of us. No one would have seen back then what was going to happen. And that is that Aboriginals would be given 55% of mainland Australia. 55% of the country they now own or have legal title to. And they're still not happy. You know why? Because I think there are activists within that group who want the whole thing. Who was it who said that it was a good idea to give away more than half the country? Who was it who did that? God, I'd like to talk to him or her. I can hear my puppy dog barking. It's getting louder, Pete. Never mind. Let me say happy birthday to you if you're having a birthday or a happy wedding anniversary. It's July 24. Oh, golly. Where's the year gone? Frightening.
July 20th. July 20th.
Why did I pick... Oh, I've been fiddling with my papers. Yeah, you're right. So it's the 19th, isn't it? I'll just blame the puppy dog. It's the 19th, so that's the 20th. Yeah, I'm sorry. Today's the 20th. Monday's going to be the 24th. Yeah. 1969, Apollo 11 lunar module carrying Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin lands on the surface of the moon. Aldrin and Armstrong walk on the moon 7 hours later. Michael Collins remains in orbit in the lunar module. And the world held its breath. You think back, those grey pictures, black and white, but the moon looked very grey, didn't it? And when the Armstrong took those steps down the ladder, no one knew what the soil was going to be like. I mean, would he disappear into it? Nobody knew. Nobody knew. What courage. And he even remembered his lines, you know, about one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. He remembered. He had the presence of mind to remember that. Oh dear, oh dear. So tomorrow will be, 7 hours. Tomorrow will be when they actually open the hatch and take their first steps on the moon. All those years ago. What was the year here? The world's oldest treaty, 1654. Anglo-Portuguese treaty is reinforced. England guarantees Portugal independence and receives trade concessions in thanks. 1654. Marconi in 1937, Italian inventor, electrical engineer, pioneered work on long-distance radio transmission, Nobel Prize winner of 1909, dies of a heart attack at just 63. 2016, Australian businessman James Packer announces that he has quit 22 directorships due to mental health issues. 22? How would you possibly be able to be a director of 22 companies and have a handle on everything that was going on. I think that's enough to send somebody around the twist. Golly. Napoleon declares all French Jews must adopt family names. I don't know what that means. That was 1806. It must mean that Jewish people in France at the time didn't have a surname. They had to adopt a surname, or a family name. Natalie Wood, American actress, Miracle on 34th Street, Gypsy, Rebel Without a Cause, West Side Story, born in San Francisco in 1938 on this day, and she died in 1981, married to Robert Wagner, died in strange, sad circumstances on the boat. You remember that story? 1984, Vanessa Williams is asked to resign as Miss America because somebody published some nude photographs of her. I suppose 1984, that would be probably about right. I don't know, times have changed. I don't think anything would shock society anymore, would it? But it's always a good idea never to let somebody take nude pictures of you. You never know where they're going to end up. Nobody's ever asked me. How about you, Pete?
Once.
Oh, really? You have to tell me.
Another time.
Was it a girl or a boy?
It was a girl.
It was a girl? And she wanted to tell. Wow. Oh, you see, I haven't lived. I haven't lived. Elisha Brown, Jr., presses a 1,235-pound cheese ball at his farm. That's 560.187 kilos. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want a cheese ball in 1801, a cheese ball that size? Anyway, it's made it onto my dates. Marcia Hines, American-born Australian actress, singer, Marcia Hines. She was born in Boston, Massachusetts, 1953. I remember she came into the studio once with Tony, what was his name? Murph the Surf, Tony Murphy. Tony Murphy, they'd got engaged and she brought him in with her and she sat on his knee for the entire interview. I don't think that marriage lasted long, but beautiful, beautiful lady. Was it an engagement or a marriage? No, at that time they were just simply engaged, I think. Sioux Indian chief Sitting Bull surrenders to US federal troops in 1881. Bruce Lee, Hong Kong American martial arts and actor, Enter the Dragon, etc., dies of a cerebral hemorrhage at 32. Golly, that was in 73. And one more, Mexican-American rock guitarist Santana was born in Mexico in 1947. What's this one? 1960, the USSR recovers 2 dogs, first living organisms to return from space to Earth, on this day in 1960. Some of the things for which we remember the day. Thank you very much for your company. You got to say something, Pete?
Yes, sir. Are we going to tack on one of those?
Oh, yes.
The Aboriginal, you know.
Yes.
The 3 different ones.
Well, there are three different commercials that people have sent us, and please, you're welcome to send us anything. And if it's possible for us to use our system and put it on the air or on the record, we will. But over the next, say, 3 days, I'll show you these 3, one each day. We'll just tack one on at the end of each program, and you can have a little look. But I don't mean to frighten you. I don't mean to mislead you in any way. I just believe this is a very important choice, this referendum upcoming, and I welcome any of the information that you people send me. Thank you very much for being with us. The Court of Public Opinion will return tomorrow. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter Clayton and I will return. Believe in yourself.
The people who stand with me on this stage, I regard as giants.
Thomas Mayo.
Thomas Mayo written a handbook called the Voice to Parliament Handbook. All the detail you need.
Thomas Mayo is a signatory to the Uluru Statement from the Heart, but was also entrusted with the physical document.
Mayo is part of the referendum working group. He
spent 18 months travelling around Australia to garner support for an indigenous voice to Parliament.
And I tell you what, we are sick of governments not listening to our voice. We are going to use the rule book of the nation to force them.
There is nothing more powerful than building a First Nations voice, a black institution, a black political force to be reckoned with.
Keep going until we change the system, until we tear down the institutions that harm our people.
And also to pay respects to the elders of the Communist Party, who I think, without a doubt, have played a very important role in our activism.
You know, this is the first step. It's a vital step. Pay the rent, for example. You know, how do we do that in a way that is transparent and that it actually sees reparations and compensation to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people?
The power in the voice is that it creates the ability for First Nations to go forth with coherent positions on what legislation needs to be created, what legislation needs to be amended, and punish politicians that ignore our advice.
This is a modest request.
Authorised by Matthew Sheehan, Advance Australia, Canberra.